Jessica's scales shimmered violet with contentment as she watched her husband tend to their modest garden on the orbital station. Jack was unlike any human she'd encountered during her diplomatic postings. Where other humans were loud, boisterous, constantly moving, Jack possessed a stillness that had first confused, then intrigued, and finally captivated her. The Velkari species prided themselves on reading emotional frequencies, but Jack was a closed book, not cold but calm, deep waters that never rippled. In the 3 years since their bonding ceremony, he'd been nothing but gentle. He worked as a maintenance technician, came home precisely at sunset cycle, tended his earth plants, and listened to her talk about her work coordinating trade between 12 species. Her colleagues had questioned the match. Humans are unpredictable, they'd warned. Violent. Their history is written in blood. But Jessica had seen only kindness in Jack's dark eyes. That changed the day. The creche arrived. The alert sirens caught Jessica mid-sentence, during a conference with the station's Mixed Species Council. Red lights flooded the chamber as the administrator's voice crackled through the speakers. Creche Warband has breached Docking Bay 7. All personnel evacuate to emergency pods. This is not a drill. Jessica's heart hammered against her chest. The creche, raiders from the outer reaches who acknowledged no law but strength. They'd heard rumors of attacks, but the station was supposed to be too well defended, too insignificant a target. The council erupted into chaos. The Vornathi representative, massive and armored, immediately began coordinating security. The human ambassador started barking orders into her comm. But Jessica could only think of one thing. Jack was in Section 7, the maintenance bay, right where the creche had breached. She ran. Her security training screamed at her to head for the evacuation pods, but her legs carried her toward danger. Toward Jack. The corridors were packed with fleeing civilians, a dozen species pushing, shoving, children crying in languages that blended into a cacophony of terror. Jessica pushed against the tide, her diplomatic credentials getting her past 2 security checkpoints before she entered the devastated commercial sector. Scorch marks blackened the walls. Bodies? She forced herself not to look too closely. The creche weren't here to negotiate. She found Jack in Corridor 12B. He stood alone, positioned between the creche war party and a huddled group of civilians, maintenance workers from a dozen species, including 2 human children clutching their Delothian guardian. Behind Jack, they whispered frantically into comms, calling for help that wouldn't arrive in time. 3 creche warriors advanced on Jack, their quad-limbed bodies rippling with combat implants. Each stood twice his height. Their leader, decorated with bone trophies from 100 kills, laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Human, it snarled in gutter trade language. Step aside. Your flesh is too small to bother with. Jack didn't move. He stood empty-handed, his maintenance uniform still stained with lubricant from whatever he'd been fixing. For a moment, Jessica thought he'd frozen in fear. She started to call out, to beg him to run. Then she saw his face. The stillness was still there, but it had transformed. It wasn't the calm of peace. It was the calm before detonation. Jack's eyes had gone flat, distant, like he was looking at something far away, or perhaps something deep within. I can't do that, Jack said quietly. The creche leader's laughter died. Something in Jack's tone had registered even to its battle-addled brain. You challenge us, little human? You have no weapon. No armor. I don't need one. Jack's hand moved to his belt. Jessica hadn't even noticed it before. A simple leather sheath she'd assumed held tools. He drew the blade slowly. It was curved, elegant, gleaming like captured starlight. The kind of weapon that predated plasma and pulse rifles by millennia. The kind that required you to be close enough to smell your opponent's fear. A sword. My wife's people have a saying, Jack said, his voice still that eerie calm. They believe predators can sense other predators. He rolled his shoulders, and Jessica saw how his stance had shifted, coiled, ready. Can you? The creche attacked. What happened next would later become confused in Jessica's memory. A blur of motion too fast to track. But certain moments crystallized, Jack's blade catching the first creche's strike, turning it aside with minimal effort. The economy of his movements, no wasted motion, no flourish. The second creche lunging and Jack simply not being where it expected. The sword opening a crimson line across its flank. The way he moved between the civilians and danger like gravity itself bent to protect them. The creche leader roaring and charging, all four arms swinging weapons. Jack stepping into the attack, into it, his blade finding the gaps in alien anatomy with surgical precision. The fight lasted 90 seconds. When it ended, 3 Kresh warriors lay bleeding and Jack stood unmarked. He flicked the blade once, clearing it, and resheathed it in a single smooth motion. Then he turned to the civilians. "Station security is 2 minutes out," he said gently. "Stay together. Don't look at them." He meant the bodies. His voice had returned to the soft tone she knew. "You're all going to be fine." Only then did he notice Jessica. Their eyes met across the corridor. She saw him see her seeing him, this other version of Jack that had existed beneath the quiet exterior. She watched concern ripple across his face, watched him wonder if she'd be afraid now. Jessica walked forward through the settling dust. Her scales had gone pure white, the Valkyrie expression of overwhelming emotion. She reached up and touched his face. "How?" she whispered. Jack's shoulders sagged slightly. "Before I came to the station, I served. Earth's military. Special operations. I thought I'd left it behind." He glanced at the sword. "I should have told you." "You were protecting us," Jessica said. "You're still protecting us." "I'm a maintenance tech who tends gardens," Jack said quietly. "That's who I wanted to be. That's who I am now." Jessica looked at the civilians behind him, alive because of those 90 seconds. Looked at her husband, this complex layered man she'd married. "You're both," she said finally. "The quiet man who tends gardens and the one who draws his sword when gardens need defending." Jack pulled her close and she felt him trembling slightly. Adrenaline or relief, she couldn't tell. "I never want to be that person again," he whispered into her shoulder. "You won't have to be," Jessica promised. Then, more truthfully, "Not often." Because she understood now what her colleagues had tried to tell her. Humans carried their history inside them, 10,000 years of war and survival. Most days they were poets and engineers, gardeners and philosophers. But when the moment required it, they could reach back to ancestors who'd survived by being the scariest thing in the dark. She'd married a quiet human, but she'd also married Earth's legacy, the blade that only drew when all other options had failed. And somehow that made her love him even more.